So let me just give you a short historical lesson on who is a South African by birth, because this is a question that is coming up a lot in parliamentary sessions where people are coming to parliament to account, and then there are these new MPs like Souls, can't remember what that guy is, I think it's Saul from the Patriotic Alliance, who keeps banging on about how people are not South African by birth. So let me give you a historical lesson about who is a South African by birth and who is not a South African by birth. So we have a constitution of South Africa, which is very weird. In the preamble, it says South Africa belongs to all who lives in it. It doesn't say South Africa belongs to all who are South African by birth. Okay, there's a very good reason why they left it to say it belongs to all who lives in it, because the question of who is a South African by birth is a very complicated question that Nelson Mandela and all those who were doing the CODESA negotiations should have dealt with it and should have clarified it. But they were afraid to deal with it. They were afraid to give us the clarification that we need, so that the future generations can be able to know who is a South African by birth. Because now the problem is that generation of people is dying, and then we have this new generation of members of parliament who don't exactly understand the dynamics of who is a South African by birth and who is not a South African by birth. Because when they come up, all they think is that, oh no, you were born within the corridors of the 9 provinces, therefore you are a South African by birth and you do have an ID. And if you are not born within those corridors, then you are not a South African. And they are missing the whole historical context and the reason why we have that preamble in the Constitution, that everyone who lives in South Africa is considered a South African. Okay, and this is why when you ask these old politicians, they will never get involved in the conversations about they are illegal immigrants and they need to leave. They will always say no one is leaving, and they will always welcome people that we consider to be immigrants, and for very good reason, because they have the historical context that you young generations don't have. So let me just try to give you what I'm talking about. So if you are a black person, you were born before 1970, you are most likely to have been a South African by birth. Okay, you were born in Transkei, you were born or you were born in a Mthatha, you were born in a Bloemfontein. Before 1970, you were considered a South African by birth. Here's the problem. If you were born between 1970 and 1994, it is most likely that you were not a South African by birth. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Julius Malema is not a South African by birth. Fikile Mbalula is not a South African by birth. Who else can I take? The guy from the MKP, who's the one who just got fired as the Secretary General. He is not a South African by birth, because they were born in the homelands. And if you were born in the homelands, you were not considered a South African by birth, especially if you were born between 1970 and 1994. You guys must actually go and look at your birth certificates, the original ones your mothers got at the hospital. You were not a South African by birth. You were declared a South African by birth on the 27th of April 1994. As an act of parliament, you were declared to be a South African by birth. Well, not by birth, but you were declared to be. So you were not born a South African. So when we have these members of parliament coming up and say, somebody is not a South African by birth, what exactly do they mean? Because majority of black South Africans were not South African by birth. That is just one dynamic. Here's the other dynamic. People of Lesotho, they are South African by birth, based on heritage. The law as we currently have allows people from Lesotho, people from Eswatini, people from Botswana, and people from Zimbabwe, especially the people from the south, they are legally considered to be South Africans by birth because of their heritage. And people as far as Zambia, the Lodi tribe of Zambia, they are considered to be South African by birth. They could actually go and apply for an ID and they could get it. And people from Namibia, they are considered to be South Africans by birth. So when you guys come and say, oh, but so and so is not a South African by birth, what exactly do you mean? Because you are just taking a simplistic understanding of what has happened in this country. So this is why these all politicians, they will never go and entertain any suggestions that there are people who need to be kicked out of South Africa because they were not born there. They will never entertain it because they understand that they themselves, they were not considered to be South Africans for most of their life. So go and ask your parents to say, hey, do you still have my birth certificates? Because I can assure you, if you were born in Seshego between 1970 and 1994, you were not considered a South African. If you were born in Ulundi, you were not considered to be a South African. You can even go to people born in Mtata, people born in Kwatwa, people born in Mahikeng, people born in Soshanguve. They were not considered to be South Africans by birth. So the questions of who is a South African is a question that was left open because people did not want to deal with it, because if we have to define it, you are going to exclude people that could come back and sue you and say, but I don't want to have the ID, I don't want to have a passport, and I don't want to live in South Africa, but it is my heritage, it is my right. And one day if I decide that I want to have an ID, I should be able to get it. This is why our immigration is open-ended. It's open-ended. So that one day if people of Lesotho decide, well, we want to have an ID, they can just go to the Home Affairs and get an ID of South Africa. So this idea that the Zama-Zamas are foreigners and they must be deported, no one in government is going to entertain it, because they know the law, they know what happened during those CODESA negotiations and what they should have said, but they didn't. They left the question open. So next time you are tempted to call a person from Bulawayo that this person is an immigrant in South Africa, that they must go abahambe, please do not do that, because you might find that they have as much right, if not more, of being in that country than you do. So go and equip yourself, especially these members of parliament who are so smart these days and are making these comments. Go and equip yourself. Go and learn about your own claim to being a South African, and then stop telling people about who is and who is not a South African, because even the ANC left the question open. So that's just the historical context of that citizenship that people are fighting so much about.